A recent article in Psychology Today was talking about loneliness. It said, research indicates a correlation between social isolation and increased risks of depression, anxiety, and cognitive decline. Prolonged periods of loneliness can also lead to physical issues, such as high blood pressure, heart disease, and a weakened immune system. The absence of social interaction can trigger a stress response in the body, resulting in chronic inflammation and other long-term health complications. Loneliness is an issue. It is a problem. We have connection problems. Because fundamentally, human beings were made to live in connection with people. We were made to be in relationships. And if we're not in any form of relationships, if we have no connections with people, it has effects on our mental health, has effects on our physical health. So this is a significant issue. Today we're talking about our connection problems with each other, and a lot of it is also applicable to our connection problems with God as well. It's interesting, in 1 John 3:1, it says this, how great is the love the Father has lavished on us that we should be called children of God. And that is what we are. Now, I'm a scientific person, okay? I was brought up in a science household. My mum sitted over there, brought me up teaching me science. She was a microbiologist. My dad designed nuclear submarines. So I find the science stuff very interesting. And the fact that human beings are designed to reproduce with two parents, with a male and a female, and then you have children, I think it's really interesting, because God could have designed humanity any way he wanted, but he chose to design it with male and female and children. And I think one of the ways that he designed it to have children who were brought up by parents is so we would understand his nature as a father. You see, God is there with the nature of what we now call Father. And he's saying, how can I demonstrate to this humanity that I create what I am like to them? And I think he says, what I will do is I will have them to reproduce with parents and children, and the parents will look after the children. You know, he could have made it like one of those species where once the child is born, you know, it comes out of an egg, swims off, has nothing to do with the parents at all. God could have done it that way, but that would have taught us nothing about the nature of God as a father. It says in Ephesians 5:31 and 32, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and will be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a profound mystery. But I'm talking about Christ and the church. So God knows there's going to be this incredible relationship with the church as the bride of Christ and Jesus. And he says, how am I going to demonstrate that? So he has male and female, so that we would understand something about a relationship which actually alludes to Christ and the church. You see, our relationships are important. Our relationship with God is important. Now today, I'm going to be talking mostly about marriage problems, okay? So in terms of connection problems, I'm talking about problems within marriage, okay? But I don't want everyone to switch off, okay? If you've got no marriage problems, you know, you're married and you've got no problems, then maybe you should come and teach, right? Because you know, it'd be amazing if you've got absolutely nothing. But you may have issues in the future, so this will be useful. If you're not married now, you might get married in the future, in which case this is useful. If you've got no intention of ever marrying, you may talk to somebody who is married, and you may be able to give them the benefit of this information. And also, although I'm mainly talking about marriage problems, a lot of what I'm going to say is actually relevant to lots of our different relationships. So please don't switch off if you think, because I will demonstrate the relevance to you all. This is the way I'm going to approach it. I'm going to think about cause and effect. Cause and effect. So let's consider some problems. If someone is unhappy in their marriage, angry in their marriage, confused, overwhelmed, we might say those are problems within the marriage. And maybe they are. But I'd like to take it from a slightly different angle. Say those are not problems in the marriage. Those are the effects of the problems in the marriage. You see, if you're unhappy about something. So the question is not, you need to stop being unhappy. The question is, so what's the problem that's making you unhappy? If you're angry, what is the issue that's making you angry? If you're confused, what are the issues that are making you confused? If you're overwhelmed, you get what I'm saying. So let's realize that there can be root causes to our connection problems. Very often when somebody is thinking, I have a problem in my marriage, they're saying, I'm unhappy, angry, confused, overwhelmed. That is the problem I need to fix. Now here's the sad news. You can't fix those in isolation because those are the effects. What you need to do is you need to find the causes, and the causes you can work on. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go through some stuff which is not from the Bible, although it's applicable, and tell you about the 5 causes of problems within marriages. And it's relevant to other relationships too. Number 1 is growing cold in that relationship. When you start a relationship, then generally speaking, there's a lot of heat in that relationship. There's a lot of strength in that relationship. But over time, it can grow cold. Now, with many relationships, this does not matter. How many friends that I was good friends with at school, how many friends do you think I'm still in touch with? The answer is none. I then went to university. Obviously, I had some good, strong friends at university. Have a guess how many friends I'm still in contact with from university. The answer is none. Okay, I moved here from Birmingham 14 years ago. How many people do you think I'm still in contact with from Birmingham? The answer is none. Okay, so you see a pattern here. Okay, when it comes to me and my friendships, I make friendships with people I'm with. Once I've moved on, you know, that's it. Hillary is in touch with people from school, people from university, people from Birmingham. She remains in touch with every level of kind of person she's been with. We're just different personalities in that way. Is there a problem that I'm not in touch with those old friends? No. It's really not a problem, okay? So don't worry about it if you've lost touch. Because some relationships, you know, they come, they go, you move on, no problem. So, not an issue there. Also, your relationship with your children is supposed to change, okay? The kind of relationship a parent has with a 5-year-old is very different to the relationship they have with a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old or a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old. And I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking you've got 30-year-olds who are still behaving like 5-year-olds, but technically it's supposed to change. So again, there will be not exactly you grow cold in that relationship, but it won't be the same depth of relationship perhaps as you have when a child is utterly dependent on you. They're supposed to leave. Do you remember what that scripture said about how they will leave their family and they will go and be united into to be one flesh with the wife? There's supposed to be a changing in that relationship. There is not supposed to be a growing cold in our relationship with God. Some interesting verses from Revelation 2:4. I hold this against you. You have forsaken your first love. Revelation 3:15 and 16. I know your deeds. You are neither cold nor hot. I wish you were either one of them. So because you're lukewarm, neither hot nor cold, I'm about to spit you out of my mouth. God wants us to maintain that strength, that heat in our relationship with him. It should not grow cold. It matters how you relate to God. And of course, in marriage, it really matters. Because when the relationship goes cold, that's when it leads to the effects I was talking about earlier. We need to be honest about this. Physical attraction in a marriage relationship is not enough. Okay, I am not as handsome now as I used to be. I know it's hard to believe. But we change as we grow older. The intense feelings of love that you have when you're first in a relationship, you know, how your heart is full and you just want to be that person all the time. That's not enough. It's great. It's nice. It is not enough to have a stable long-term relationship. There is no soulmate out there. There's this myth that you see portrayed by the media of There's the one for you. You've got to find the one. And if you find the one, you will live happily ever after. If you find the one, everything will be perfect. Let me tell you this, there's no perfect one out there waiting for anyone. And this lie is so insidious because people who are not entirely happy with their relationship see a film where someone leaves their partner because now they've found the one. And in the terms of the film, the one is always perfect, and the film ends and it says they live happily ever after. And let me tell you, that's not what happens. Not without some work, not without some effort. We see this with Samson. Samson is, there's some Bible characters you're supposed to copy. Can I just stress, Samson is not one of them. All right? Okay, so he goes from one woman to the next. He marries a woman. He sees a woman. He says, well, I like her. And he goes to his parents and he says, arrange a marriage. I want that. I want to be married to that woman. Arrange a marriage for me. And he moves on, basically within 24 hours of his marriage. He's like, oh, it doesn't feel the same as it did. I'm off. It's not how it's supposed to be. The fundamental point is this: your relationship will grow cold if you let it. If you don't let it, it won't grow cold. If you don't do something to make certain it doesn't grow cold, then it will. It is inevitable. And this is kind of a two-part series, a two-part sermon. Next week, I'm going to be talking about some very specific things that we can do to keep those relationships warm. Number two, second thing that is a cause of marriage problems is this. It's when you live separate lives. One of the reasons why a marriage relationship grows cold is if the two people live separate lives. Ephesians 5:31 reminds us, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. The whole point is, when you get married, you're supposed to start operating as one unit. You don't operate as two separate people, you operate as one. And if you don't operate as one, you will cause a problem within that relationship, because that's not how it was designed to be. Some marriages become more like their flatmates. Okay, so they're living in the same house. So, in that sense, they have a relationship. They live in the same place. They share the chores. Just like flatmates share the chores. It's your turn to do this. It's your turn to do this. I'll do this if you do that. And yet they have different interests. They have different sets of friends. You go out with your friends. I'll go out with my friends. I don't like your friends. You don't like my friends. Well, that's all right. You go out with yours. I'll go out with mine. Relaxing apart. Oh, I'm tired. I want to relax. I'm going to go off and do this. You go off and do what you want to relax. I'll go off and do what I want to relax. And they live separate lives. It does not work. Now, a bit of balance. You do need some independence, okay? I don't think Hillary could cope with me being like 100% in her face all the time, okay? So you do need some independence. There will be times where you go off with some of your friends, but you need friends in common. There will be some interests that you have that your partner doesn't have. Fine, go have that, that hobby, that interest that's separate. But don't let it be the only interest that you have as a couple. You need some joint interest. You need some things that you do together. But you do need some space. Because separate lives will not work in the long run. And can I just say, this is also relevant for children and parents, okay? Now, I know in the long run, we want them to become independent, but in that period of time, if you don't spend time with your kids, if you just leave your kids to complete their own devices, guess what? That's going to cause a problem in your relationship. The relationship with your kids is fundamentally founded by how much time do you spend with them. So like I said, this is not only relevant to marriage. Okay. Sorry. I was going to move to number 3, but I forgot about this. Can I just point out as well, it's also true of your relationship with God. If you live separate lives with God, if this is your bit for God, where you come on a Sunday, and then you don't have any relationship with God for the next 6 days, and then you come back next Sunday, your relationship with God will grow cold. Your relationship with God will not be effective. You will have problems in your relationship with God, because God says we need to connect with him on a daily basis. So this is also true for that. Number 3. Pardon me. Number three is a big category. It's what I'm calling internal tensions. What are the internal tensions in your relationship, in your marriage? Because you are different people. We are all different people, and therefore we have different ideas about things like politics, about how you raise your children, about what you spend money on, about how much money should you save, your ideas about religion, your ideas about who's going to do the housework. You have all these different things, and the two people within the marriage will have different ideas. On some of these things, they may be more unified. On some of those things, they may be more separate. But no two people are identical on everything. So what do we do about internal tensions? The first thing is, it's best to talk about them before you get married. Okay, I literally have been in a marriage counseling session or pre-marriage counseling session, because if I'm going to if I'm going to marry somebody, you know what I mean? If I'm going to marry two people to each other, all right, I've married loads of people. I've only been married to one person, but I've married loads of people. If I'm going to marry two people to each other, then I insist that we do some pre-marriage talking. And one of the things we ask is, what's your thing about kids? How many kids do you want? And I've literally been there, and the woman has said 3, and the man has said, no, we're not having kids. And they're already at the point of wanting to get married. And I'm like, well, okay, I mean, there's no right answer to this. But don't you think this is something you perhaps need to talk about? Because if you're serious that you never ever want children, and you're serious that you definitely want several children, you may be incompatible. Or you need to find a way through this. It is best to talk about these things before you get married, which is great for those of you in here who are not married, and not so useful for those of you who are already married and wondering what to do about these internal tensions. Okay, so for those who are now thinking it's too late, no, it isn't, because the question becomes, okay, how are we going to decide on these things then? There are differences of opinion. How are we going to decide what we do? We need a resolution strategy. We need a way of coping with it. And there are lots of different things that you can do. I'm not going to go into all of them. One extra thing on the side of internal tensions is annoying habits. Okay? Now, I am a fiddler. Okay? If I am stationary, thinking, I will start to fiddle. Okay? If there's an object to fiddle with, I will fiddle with the object. If there is no object to fiddle with, I find myself fiddling with the edge of clothing, or a pocket, or the seam of my jeans. And Hillary, God bless her, usually can cope for a little while, and then at some point she might just rest a hand over my hand that's fiddling, whatever, and it'll just be like that. Oh, sorry. What do we do about annoying habits? Now, if you want to know about Hillary's annoying habits, then as a good husband, of course, I'm not going to talk about them. All right. Now, here's one of the classic tensions about annoying habits. The toilet seat. The toilet seat. Is the toilet seat left up or left down? Okay? Now, here's the thing. You can look at it from different ways. So, I've heard people making the point from the women's point of view, which is, every time I come to the toilet, it's been left up. It should be left down. But then the man might say, well, that means I have to lift up the toilet every time I come to it. So why is it that you get your way, because you always want it left down, and I get my way, which is easier to leave it up? Now let's leave apart the fact that there could be smells and disgusting things that you could see and all the rest, which could be a very valid reason for everybody to leave the toilet seat down. Leaving that to one side, let's just consider this. We need to accept people as they are. Okay? It shouldn't be a big issue. We've not divorced over my fiddling. Okay? Hillary accepts that I fiddle. but she has found a strategy to bring to my attention, without being horrible, that I'm annoying her by fiddling. We learn to accept people as they are, but we also don't annoy our partner unnecessarily. If you know that you do something that annoys your partner, why would you carry on? Why would you continue to do that? This is why in our house, the toilet seat is down, okay? Philippians 2:3-4 is not in the context of marriage, but it is relevant. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourselves. Each of you should look not only to your own interests, but also to the interests of others. So if you want to resolve some of these internal tensions, what you do is you try and do it the way the other person wants to do it. And if both partners are trying to do that, it's amazing how those tensions are released. Final thing about this, internal tensions can be more problematic than I've described. I've been quite trivializing, but one way that some families think they resolve an internal tension is this: one partner gets their way. In an argument, they blow up, they get aggressive, they get loud, they get shouty, and the other partner backs off and says, you can have what you want. And then they're happy again. And it looks like the tension has disappeared. But actually the tension is hidden. That has not resolved the tension. Examine yourself. If you're thinking, we have no internal tensions in our marriage, I want you to think, what happens when there's a disagreement? Do you put your foot down? Do you blow up? Do you get angry until your partner has decided they're going to agree with you? Because if that's the way you resolve your tension is not resolved. The other important thing about not trivializing this is some internal tensions benefit from external help. Okay? For example, addictions. If somebody in a relationship has an addiction, whether it's an addictive behavior, whether it's addicting to a substance, legal or illegal, that is a problem. That will distort and potentially destroy a relationship. And the person or the people within that relationship may not be capable of dealing with it on their own. You might want outside help. Abuse is unacceptable. Verbal, physical, emotional abuse is unacceptable. It's technically, from the psychologist's point of view, it's technically an internal tension because it's something that's arising within the partnership, but it is unacceptable. And if your partner is giving you verbal, physical, or emotional abuse and there's no resolution to it, I strongly recommend you get some external help. Internal tensions. All right, number 4 of 5. Outside pressures. You see, internal tensions arise from between two people. They're internal to the relationship. But loads of the problems in our marriage are nothing to do with our marriage. It's about stuff that goes on outside of our marriage. And the problem with that is we have no control over that. We can try and control what happens inside the marriage. You cannot control what's happening outside the marriage. So, financial worries, problems at work, pressure from extended family, problem with the in-laws, if somebody gets sick. These come from the outside and they impinge upon your relationship. And these things can destroy relationships. Financial worries are cited as one of the major problems that leads to divorce. So when you look at people divorce and they list all their reasons, probably the one that occurs most often, all right, it's not necessarily the biggest one in each case, but one that occurs most often is the financial issues that cause people to row and get angry and not agree on. Those worries often are coming from outside circumstances. There's an interesting example of this from Job 2:9. When Job had his external problems, what was his wife saying to him? His wife says, are you still holding on to your integrity? Curse God and die. All right, that's not a good way to deal with the outside pressures, okay? When Job's going through all this horrible stuff, instead of his wife standing by him, she says, you might as well just die. not the right way. Okay, the way you deal with it largely, I mean, there's 1,000 different answers depending on what the pressure is. But let me just say one thing about this. You recognize the problem is coming from outside the relationship. If it's affecting one partner, then it might be that the other partner is angry. You're letting that affect our relationship. If that's your attitude, you've got a problem. But if you think, well, it's not necessarily their fault, it's coming from outside, so I shouldn't be blaming them because this is an outside circumstance. And then what you do is you face it together. Because an external outside pressure can be the thing that tears you apart if you let it, or it can be the thing that pulls you together if you face it together. Last one, communication. Communication within relationships is absolutely vital. And I would actually say that communication is the key to solving everything I've been speaking about. Communication is key. Matthew 18:15. Again, not in the context of marriage, but very applicable to all relationships. If another believer sins against you, go privately and point out the offense. If the other person listens and confesses it, you have won that person back. Can I highlight? Won that person back. I'll come to why I've highlighted that in a second. If you do not have communication within your relationship, I would argue you don't even have a relationship. Because it is so basic, so central to what relationship is. If you're not communicating, it's not there. It doesn't exist. So without communication, the first problem we said was your relationship grows cold. Well, if you don't communicate, your relationship will grow cold. If you do communicate, you've got a better chance of keeping it warm. Without communication, you can't act as one unit. Without communication, you can't resolve the internal tensions. Without communication, you will not cope with the outside pressures. Communication is absolutely vital. So I just want to say some quick tips for communication within marriage. 1, be honest. If you are not honest in your communication, you are failing to communicate. If somebody says, "Are you okay?" and you say, "Yes, I'm fine," you have just lied to them if you're not fine. If there's a problem, talk about the problem. Be honest. Now, I would like to say it really, really helps if you're polite whilst you're being honest. It's really, really helpful if you're sensitive to the other person whilst you're being honest. So that's a really good positive thing as well. All right? But polite and sensitive doesn't work unless you're also honest. And the danger is sometimes because we don't want to cause an issue or a problem, then we lie in a very polite, sensitive way, and we think we're communicating well because we haven't caused a fuss. But if you've not been honest, communication really has not happened. There was some interesting research, actually I didn't stick this on the notes, but I'll just mention it. There was some research that was done about marriages that lasted a long time and how often they argued about issues. And you would think that the situation where people argued a lot would be the marriages that didn't last. And the ones where they didn't argue very much were the ones that lasted a long time. Turns out the opposite was true. But there's a very key feature. If they argued or disagreed about small things, they never turn into big things. If they start communicating when they've already I'm not really happy about this is going on, I'm not happy about that, what can we do about this, how can we do this better? Then if you deal with these things when they're small, you have a lot more discussions, but you resolve stuff. The ones where they wait until somebody blows up because they haven't been communicating honestly, those are the relationships that tend to end in disaster after a relatively short time. The idea that if I keep quiet about the problems within my marriage, that is what is going to save my marriage. It is not true. Be honest. But remember, you're trying to win the person, not the argument. Remember that bit that I highlighted about when we go to somebody, you're trying to win the person. When you communicate, you're trying to win that person, not win an argument. You have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Listen more than you speak. Just because you've spoken does not mean you have communicated successfully unless you've listened as well. And having said that, words are not enough. You know, positive actions, body language. You know I love you is not positive, okay? You know, I use the words, I told her I loved her. Okay, but what's the message that comes across? Body language is important too. And last point on communication is this. You only know if you have communicated successfully if you know that the other person understood. And the best way to know if somebody has understood is at the end of it, you say, so what do you understand from what I've said? What are you getting from that? Here's what I think you're saying. I think you're saying this, this, and this. What do you think I'm saying? And if they say you're saying this and this, and if it turns out you're agreed, you go, great, that was successful communication. We did it right. We both understood each other. Sometimes you have a conversation, and what the person hears is very different from what you were trying to say. Maybe because they're being defensive, maybe because you said 10 things and they were so annoyed by 1 thing, they didn't hear the other 9. Whatever it is, whatever the reason, I will encourage you, don't assume you've had a good, successful communication until you've said, so what have you got out of this? I'll tell you what I've got out, you tell me what you've got out, and we'll see if we're on the same page. And if you are, great, successful communication. So those are our 5 things. As we come to finish, how do we respond to this? Well, I want to remind you, this is about spotting causes before they turn into big effects. So I'm not trying to help you deal with the anger, the confusion, the unhappiness, and all that sort of stuff, okay? If it's already got there, that's probably bigger than what this sermon's trying to address. What I'm trying to do is to say, examine your relationships and see if any of these things are creeping in. Because if you recognize them now, you can save yourself a lot of effect in the future. Are you cold in your relationship? Are you living separate lives? Are you resolving internal tensions rather than just pretending they're not there? Are you standing together when there's an outside pressure? Or is one partner blaming the other and leaving them to it? And lastly, are you communicating? And I said this is not just about marriage. So although those are applicable to marriage, let's consider them in terms of your relationship with your partner, your children, the church, and with God. Are you growing cold in terms of your relationship with God, in terms of your relationship with the church and people in the church? Are you living separate lives with God? Are you living separate lives? Do you not talk to anybody from the church unless you're here on a Sunday? Are you resolving internal tensions? If there's something that's kind of niggling at you with your kids, niggling at you with me, then you're allowed to come and talk about it. You're allowed to talk to God when you don't understand what's going on with him. The start of this whole thing, this series, Stuff We Face, we did a 3-part series on Job, understanding about suffering. God is okay with us venting at him. Are you standing together against outside pressures? Or are you blaming people within the church, blaming people within your family, blaming God? And the most important one, are you communicating?